Okay, in this podcast, what we're going to talk about are units of measurement. Units of measurement are arguably one of the most important things we're going to use all year. If you can do the math using the units, it will make the problem solving in this course a lot easier. So this is a pretty important topic that we're going to talk about. Okay, let me get myself a pen here. Okay, there's many units in science that can be used, but we're going to use a handful of them primarily. For example, we're going to use mass, length, time, temperature, amount, and energy. And probably the two units that are the most unknown to you would be amount and energy. What you want to notice is the unit name and then the symbol that goes along with it. So when we're talking about mass, I'm not always going to use the word mass, and I'm not always going to use the word grams, but what I will use is the lowercase g. So for example, if I say there's 15 grams of something, I'm going to write it 15g. I want to point out length. We usually use meter, however we'll also use centimeter, and we'll talk about the prefix in a little bit. We use seconds. For temperature, we're going to use degrees Celsius or Kelvin. We will hardly ever use Fahrenheit in this course. Almost always degrees Celsius or Kelvin. When we talk about amount of something, we're going to use this new unit that we call the mole, which we'll discuss in much more detail later. And when we talk about energy, we'll use the prefix joule. All right. What we're going to use primarily in this course is the metric system. So the metric system is a lot different than the English system because of the fact that it's based on units of 10. And that's what makes using the metric system so easy. An example would be in the English system, there's 12 inches in a foot, there's 5,280 feet in a mile, etc. There's not much rhyme or reason between the units. However, in the metric system, everything is based on a factor of 10. So if you have 1 meter, we can easily convert that to centimeters because there's 100 centimeters in 1 meter. There's 1,000 millimeters in a meter. There's 1,000 meters is a kilometer, etc. So everything is based on a factor of 10. You want to know these prefixes. In other words, you want to know that deci has the symbol D and it means 1/10. Centi has the symbol C and it means 1/100th. Milli is 1,000th, etc. Now we'll use micro and nano pretty often. We won't use pico that often, but you should still know what pico stands for. On this side, we're going to use primarily kilo, but hecto and deca are important, but definitely we will use kilo most often. And now we see mega, giga, and even tera used fairly often. That's simply because of computer chip processing speed and storage capabilities. So know all of the prefixes, know the symbols, and what they represent. We'll use those extensively throughout the year. Alright, what we want to talk about now is converting units in the metric system. So what we want to be able to do is convert from centimeters to meters easily. And hopefully at some point in your school you should have learned the prefix King Henry died unfortunately drinking chocolate milk. What this stands for are the prefixes kilo, hecto, deca, the base unit, deci, centi, and milli. So if we're going to convert 15.3 centimeters to meters, what we need to go is from centimeters to the base unit, meters. Notice there's no prefix in front of the M, so the base unit would be meters. As soon as you put a prefix in front of it, then you have to decide how many of that base unit you have. So when we say a centimeter, that's 1/100th of a meter. So if we do the conversion, we simply have to move 2 factors of 10, which would move the decimal place 2 places. So we're going to move our decimal place 1, 2. So 15.3 centimeters is equal to 0.153 meters. And that should make sense. If you think about 15.3 centimeters, that would be roughly 12 inches or a foot, which would be roughly a tenth of a meter. But don't think of it too much in those terms. We want to think primarily in terms of the metric system. All right, so if we're going to go from kilograms to milligrams, we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 places. So we're going to move that decimal 6 places. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we would have 3, 4, 0, 0 milligrams. You can also write these numbers in scientific notation, so we would write that as 3.4 times 10 to the third. If you're unfamiliar with scientific notation, you definitely want to review that in your math book. If you have questions about that, you can ask. Okay, we're going now from nanometers to hectometers. Well, now, if you remember, our nano is going to be, if you remember, nano was 10 to the negative 9th, so it would take us 9 places to get back to the base unit, 10, 11. So we would actually have to move our decimal point 11 places. So 345.00, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So we would have to tack on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 zeros. Now clearly we wouldn't want to write that number like that, so we would write it in scientific notation, and that would be 10 to the negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 to the negative 9th. Okay, let's take a look at our last slide here, and what we want to talk about are exponential conversions. We're going to talk in a lot more detail when we cover dimensional analysis about converting, say, cubic centimeters to cubic meters, but the point I want to make now is the idea that 1 milliliter is equal to 1 cubic centimeter. The idea being, if you had a cube that was 1 milliliter by 1 milliliter by 1 milliliter, let's see if I can do this. Whoops. 1 milliliter by 1 milliliter. As you can see, I am not an artist. We would have a cube that would fit 1 milliliter of water, so we call it 1 cubic centimeter. That's a very important relationship that we will use throughout this course. Understanding 1 milliliter equals 1 cubic centimeter. Okay, that's it for this vodcast. It was a quick vodcast about units. What we're going to do now is use these units in most of our numbers that we use throughout the year. Remember, you always want to have a unit with your number.